Hey everyone, and welcome to On the Margins. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain. And I've got my co-host with me, MVK. How you doing?
I am doing so well. Good to see you. My name is Michael van Keulen, or MVK. I'm with Coupa. It's so great to see you. Great to be here.
Yes, and we are on site at Coupa Inspire.
Yeah.
And tell us about what's happening with you in May. Where are you traveling? Who are you seeing? What's happening?
Well, that's a lot, but yeah, no. So of course today we're at Inspire. We just had this morning our keynote with Lee and Salva and talk about the product. And Lee talked about the vision and building this network that drives the future of trade. Great announcement this morning. We are actually acquiring Searchuo to really elevate our category management and category insights, which obviously is where a lot of the value is in procurement. So that's what's happening this week, and I'm also this month going to be attending the CFO Gartner conference, where I get to talk to a lot of CFOs of some of the biggest companies in the world, and really seeing what's happening from the finance lens. And yeah, so it's going to be an exciting month.
Awesome. Where is that going to be taking place?
It's in Maryland. I said to my wife, Maryland, but that's wrong. It's Maryland. Right?
That's okay. I'm getting all sorts of city names wrong right now.
Yeah, but
so
I'm
totally
excited.
with you.
I'm excited.
So what are you talking to people about right now? What's sort of top of mind? What are leaders thinking about, worried about? What do you think?
Well, as I was flying into Vegas, I was sitting next to a supply chain leader at Schneider, and she actually is attending a different conference, but and they're a customer of ours and very grateful. But we were talking about all the tariffs, and she showed me her inbox on her computer, and she had like 600 emails from anywhere in the world talk about pricing, because of course, everything that Schneider does, of course, is being sold to their respective customers, and she's getting a lot of questions from their respective sales teams on how should I price out the tariffs, where is the product coming from, and what should we bake in, and what's real, and what's maybe future. And then, of course, we heard there's a pause. And so there is so much dynamics going on. So tariffs obviously is the big topic. How do we react from a supply chain and procurement point of view? How do we build that optionality? How do we maybe reroute certain products from one place to the other to avoid it or mitigate it? And are we putting it into our cost, because are we competitive? And she and I talked for a while on the plane, and it was a great conversation, and that's kind of was the setting the scene for what we've talked about here at Inspire so far.
Well, and what we're going to be talking about today, but also how do we get 8 hours sleep with all of this going on right now? I don't think anybody's getting any sleep at the moment. But I heard conversations similar to this when I was waiting for my bags in Vegas. Yeah. And people all around me were talking about how they're talking to different people within their companies and what they're talking about, how much product is, depending on where they are. Some folks had offices in Canada, so they weren't really worried about them too much. But in the US, they're having all sorts of conversations around pricing and what they're going to do and how to mitigate the risk during all of this.
Yeah, totally. And it impacts a lot of different departments in every company. And so it's no longer a procurement supply chain problem, it's a business problem. Yeah. And it just elevates us, and so we should embrace it. That's what we talked about on the plane as well, which I believe her name was Susan. We talked about like how we should embrace this. This is again an opportunity for us in procurement and supply chain, as it was 5 years ago, as it was in 2010, and a few other situations in the past. It's for us this opportunity to grab the seat and take it and own it and raise the bar. And so, yes, it is uncertain, it's unpredictable, but it is an opportunity for us in procurement to really shine. So I encourage everybody to embrace it.
Well, and this is what we're built for.
Exactly.
This is why you joined supply chain.
This is why we got excited about this thing in the first place, right? So yeah.
All right. Well, today we're talking about tariffs and global trade with Mark, and I want to invite you onto the set, and thank you so much for joining us. Mark, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I work for Digital Commerce 360, and we like to call ourselves a news gathering organization and primarily a journalistic research company. What that means is we're not consultants, we're not database folks, and we're not a Gartner or a Forrester or anything like that. What we are is a committed group of serious journalists that cover digital technology, primarily from the e-commerce perspective, but we like this stuff, we go down deep in this stuff, and we like to tell the stories of what the industry is doing to move forward. And to your point on the tariffs, we can cover a lot of ground with that. but we can also kind of zero in, at least to the people that are talking to us for the stories we're doing, about what they're thinking, feeling, and actually doing, and it's actually quite a bit. So, in a nutshell, that's us.
Well, and we're seeing that all across social media. I've been seeing a lot on Instagram from small companies talking about how it's affecting them, what it looks like, how they're going to pause, and really just talking all sorts of different topics.
One of the things I like to kind of point, I love this line. I do quite a bit of these kinds of things, and I like to say the dinosaurs still roam the earth. What I mean is, I go back to the very beginning, and I mean the very beginning of e-commerce, both with B2B and B2C. And I kind of find myself, I spent 15 years researching, the biggest online retailers in the world and ranking them on their key metrics, including online sales. So my point is, I kind of fancy myself the historian of both sides of the ball, B2B and B2C. So I have seen the timeline since 1998. I was there covering the dot-com crash. That's how far back that goes. I was there during the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009. So if we get into that type of timeline, there are similar trends, but in this one, the big tsunami one, there's a lot of critical differences that relate directly to procurement, supply chain, back-end spend management. Big, huge issue with that.
Very true.
So
with all that experience, and you've done this for a while, and so have I, but it's just amazing experience. In your career of business reporting, what have you seen, and what could be comparable to what we're seeing today?
Well, let's drill down to the top of mind here, which is during the great lockdown, the pandemic, there was literally a quiet sea change that became what we're talking about today, a digital transformation. In other words, the traditional spend management procurement teams of somebody older, kind of used to more of a legacy system, back end, kind of manual, people-driven world, that all changed. And out went guys like me, frankly, my age. What came in was a digitally driven buying team that is anywhere from 1 to 3 to 5 to 10 people. It's cross-functional across the organization. And I could quote you stats on the fact that these buyers are self-service driven, they're data driven, and they want to do business digitally with the customers that are going to give them not just the best price, but the trust, the brand recognition, the experience. That's what they want. And they're very clear on that. Tariffs aside, these are very clear mandates from these B2B buyers. We do stats on them. Everybody does stats on them. But the fact of the matter is, when it comes to the tariffs, these B2B buyers, they are unforgiving. They want what they want. And you could talk to a Grainger, MSC, Watsco, Fastenal. All of them got the memo months ago. Frankly, they got it years ago. When COVID hit, a lot of people looked to say, uh-oh, what happened? And they looked at their tier 1 supply chain. What they didn't take into account was 2, 3, 4 on down the line. So 4 or 5 years ago was the wake-up call for procurement leaders, supply chain leaders, enterprise software leaders to look at how do we organize our back end to organize the business front end all across the mission critical parts of this, including sales and all of that, to give that B2B buyer, big, small, otherwise, doesn't matter, they want what they want. And to your point with Schneider with 600 memos from clients, I'm not surprised by that. But what we're seeing in terms of the reporting we're doing is that, yeah, they got the memo. They know the problem. The thing is, this one is more up and down and sideways than they're used to. I mean, these guys aren't new. They've had crises before. Yep. But if you look at the pricing optimization, you want to get granular with this stuff, personalization, product recommendations, all of that is fed from the back end, and all of that has to kind of go out to the buyer who wants to know, do you have it? Yeah. And so what the B2B companies are doing and focusing on is, how can I optimize my pricing, my current inventory levels, as I try and shift to a longer term game plan to figure out where is my sourcing coming from. So interesting times we're living in, I think.
And it's all table stakes. Like, this is what everybody's looking for. And I used an example a couple of weeks ago around Apple. So during the pandemic, they moved some of their manufacturing into India because it's where they found a new consumer market. And now, today, they are happy that they did that because they're going to ship 50% of their iPhones from India this year so that they don't have the tariffs from China. And so it's decisions like that that were made a few years ago, like you said, that are benefiting some organizations today. So talk to me about some patterns that you're seeing amongst some of the retailers, not only here in North America, but in Europe. Talk to us about that.
Well, I mean, it's so interesting and so dynamic that that's where people are trying to figure out what they're doing. And I'm talking about, I'm talking about a distribution company like Grainger, 12 billion selling all kinds of industrial supplies. I'm talking about, a 1963 founded company up there in Massachusetts who does fasteners for a living. They do 60% of the fastener market through their distribution channel. My point is, this $12 billion guy and the $60 million guy have the same thing in common, which is, I'm trying to figure out the game plan long term, and I don't know. So
I don't think anybody knows.
No,
right now.
but what they're doing is, I mean, there's specific things being done. Mm-hmm. So the sales team is out there, not just telling the customer what we have. What the sales team should be doing is using digitally driven data to inform the customer, help them solve their problem, and if they don't have it, what's the sourcing they can recommend they can get to that's going to meet that buyer need. So the fact of the matter is, the CEO, your CEO hit on this morning, this is not 1942. I mean, this is it's globally connected. And parts and services are globally connected. So costs are going up. Costs have to be analyzed. That's where the spend management comes into play here. But in the end, they're trying to get through Q2 with short-term inventory planning, price optimization, product recommendation, these kinds of short action things, trying to figure out what's the long run for quarters 3 and 4, because then that's when the sourcing gets visible, varied, expensive, or all three of the above. Right. So if you're looking at what the future is going to predict, it's going to be chaotic for just a little bit, but I think that's just the world we live in today. And smart people figure smart things out. We'll get through it, but it's going to be a bit bumpy. But the point I want to make here, the point I want to make here is that a lot of companies, despite the crisis we're in, and it's not their first rodeo, but this crisis is different. This time you have to do things that are digitally driven. So you can't just put on, a survey that like maybe we do once a year where they say, oh yes, procurement top of mind, new enterprise software, big priority, and then not do something about it because, the capital spending is not there. This time, the mandate is there from the buyer. I don't care. If you don't have it, I will find somebody who will give me the experience, the pricing, the inventory I want, and the custom features I need to do what I do. And that's unforgiving. That wave's been, man, that train left the station. That's not going to stop. So there's a lot that B2B buyers are not just scratching their head about, they are really scratching their head about.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I've been in, for those that know me well, I've been in retail myself for over 15 years. To be honest, I miss it. I miss the dynamics, but today, of course, with everything that's happening, it is a bit of a challenge. So we maybe click a little deeper. What are some of the specific tactics that you've seen retailers apply in today's environment, given the tariffs? Like, what are some of the best practices, if you will?
Well, I think I'm going to start with one of the key problems, which is, this has been coming for a lot. Supply chain visibility and supply chain problems related to this type of thing is not new. It's been evolving for 5 years, but this one hit in different ways. So to your specific point about specific tactics, one of the biggest obstacles that we are still seeing is one of the ones that's been in place for quite some time, which is older organizations, despite the fact that times have changed and it's a digitally driven world, if you will, that's data driven, they still operate with supply chain systems, distribution channels, sales channels, and marketing channels that are not cross-functional.
They are not talking.
So what I'm saying is, even with all the problems that these professionals here have to do, with spend management, supply chain visibility, procurement sourcing, inventory control, all of that, which is how these guys spend their day. One of the bigger issues is that siloed data still exists in a very major way, and siloed teams still exist in a very major way, and that is the heart of the problem. So we've been talking to directors and VPs and those types of things where they know what they have to do. Like the e-com guys, they know what they have to do. The supply chain folks know what they have to do. The sales team is telling everybody, hey, it's crazy out there. I got to get these guys what they want. And unfortunately, there's meetings about it, but there's not an organizational strategy with enterprise teams across the board in a lot of organizations that can, put together the war room to cope with this.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, there's still a fundamental problem that a lot of companies are still having to face now, and it's crisis management for them, not just figuring out the next steps for what's happening with tariffs.
Yeah, so I'd say what you're saying is like break down silos.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we've been honestly advocating, myself as a practitioner, but also from a Coupa perspective, we've always been advocating, break down the silos, single source of truth, collaborate, be transparent, and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and also get on the same page about what those words actually mean, because visibility can mean very different things to different people within an organization. And sometimes we talk about visibility, or we use words like visibility, and nobody's actually on the same page about what that actually truly means in the end.
Here's a real world example. I won't name the company, but I was out on the East Coast a year ago talking to a $5 billion kind of paper products company, if you will. And they were trying to sell into the biggest distribution companies out there, the MSCs, Graingers, Global Industrials, those kind of guys. And they weren't having much success. And their chief competitor was doing like $5 million a month minimum, and they were doing 50,000. And I said, okay, so they had this big meeting with all these all these heads of state coming in from all over the organization, and they asked me to kind of talk about some of the e-commerce stuff. But my takeaway is, I said, okay, tell me about your conversion rate. What's it? I mean, even though you're only doing 50K against a guy who's doing 5 million a month, what's your conversion rate look like? What's your average ticket looks like? What does your traffic pattern look like? I mean, even though that's small, you've got marketing guys all over this. So what is that data telling you about the problems you have to solve? And they came back and they said, well, these are the sales folks. They said, oh, we don't get that. We don't get that data. We don't have that. And retailers live and die by that. I mean, marketers on retailing teams and e-commerce teams on the B2C side, they live and die by how fast they move that conversion needle to sell what's top of mind with the consumer. On the B2B side, that is a prime example of a $5 billion company still wrestling with siloed data and cross-functional teams that are frankly not talking to one another. That one just kind of surprised me, but it didn't.
Right.
So a lot of companies have to figure out tariffs in a siloed way until it's going to be a crisis management system for them.
And I think that's a key indicator of how important technology is. And I think you have
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So the question then obviously is, so what role does technology play? And are there ways that retailers can use technology to weather the storm?
Well, I mean, the thing is, your CEO touched on this very thing this morning, which is a company, even a small company, is drowning in data. I mean, they've got the customer data, they've got the marketing data, they've got the image, they've got the data. It's there. The problem is that if you look at the broader perspective of wholesale sales, Department of Commerce, manufacturing, it's not been the best of years. Manufacturing's been flat for a number of years. Wholesalers, I think, are going to grow something like about 1.3% across the board. And you're talking $18 trillion of business. So because of, I mean, last year it was, price controls and inflation and all that, B2B expenditures and cap spending on technology was actually kind of the priority was there, but the budget was not, because these guys took a wait and see attitude.
Right.
So to your point, even though it's still not the best of times, even though, we're in this kind of tariff management for some, crisis for many. The solution is they're going to have to free up more budget to invest in the ERP, supply chain, procurement type of software because of the very same things the CEO mentioned this morning, because that is where you make informed decisions based upon the data you have coming through in an integrated fashion to the teams that need it and the way they have to interpret it to meet that B2B buyer needs. And that's as simple as that. So my point to you is, I think we're going to see, despite the fact that if you look at the surveys, spending is down, we can't, we're not, blah, blah, blah. I think my prediction is you're going to see spending on these back-end systems like the ones I just described, because they literally have to, because if they don't, they might not make it out.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, they're going to lose customers that want something that those guys are not delivering.
Yeah, and in that example that you shared,
Yeah.
that was kind of the key component, was that they weren't talking, but they also didn't have the technology to give them the insights. So let's talk really quick about tariffs.
Sure.
I just want to know, is there one thing that people should be paying attention to? Retailers, supply chain leaders, procurement leaders, what's one thing that they should be paying attention to?
The biggest thing now on the retailer side is looking at inventory control and pricing, because you can't just pass everything along to a consumer who is, if you look, you can look at all the consumer sentiment data, it's getting tight, the Michigan index was as lowest thing in a couple of years. I don't know, you can drown in those kind of stats too. But the point is, the consumers are getting a little bit spend conscious, and what they want is the price point, and they want, the item or service that they want to get. But on the retailer side, inventories have been lean for a number of years now. So personalization, product recommendation is very big with the retailer here and now, because you want to know, crisis aside, tariffs aside, do I have it in stock, that aside, personalization, if I don't have it, well, I've got a recommendation for you that's going to do that. And we haven't talked on AI, but AI is going to drive a lot of that. There's a lot of innovation going into that on the retailer side to kind of get them through this short-term inventory control and pricing issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very cool. And so just in closing, Mark, what advice would you give supply chain and procurement leaders today? What advice would you give?
You're going to get through it. You're going to get through it. This is not your first rodeo. You're going to get through it. But what you do is you drill down, you talk to your customer, you figure out what they want, and then you do the very best to optimize what you can do in a time of crisis to block and tackle.
Yeah.
To block and tackle with what you have, and you're going to get through it just fine. And because of that, because this is a crisis situation for a lot of companies, you're going to see the critical mistakes that have been made in the past you won't do again, or you're going to see, to your CEO's point this morning, the data inefficiencies. She blew me away with those stats on the buyer side, seller side. They blew me away how bad it still is. But my point is, out of this comes opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is the closing note, which is
said that too.
Focus on the op, do what you got to do, get heads down, block and tackle, and you'll get through it. Simple as that.
Love it.
Yeah, it's a mindset shift.
It is a mindset
Going
shift.
from it being a challenge, a disruption, the negative emotions, the words, going to opportunity and thinking strategically about what we need to do next.
Yeah, and
Never waste a
I can
crisis.
see folks out there in TV land going, what's this guy talking about? Just another talking head saying you got to do all this. Well, my point is, I think they got the memo. They're doing it. So
What did you just say about crisis?
No, I said never waste a crisis. Never.
no, and they don't.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for joining us here on the Margins. And thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Trivia time. Make sure to put your comments in, or your answers in the comment to win a pickleball set from Coupa. I can't wait to see who wins.